Okay, so let's keep it going with the Grand Prix. So after e4, c5 and f4, this is one of the ways to play the Grand Prix. There's also knight c3. We're gonna go through that later, maybe in the following video or maybe later. So d5 is mentioned in some of the previous videos, and in the previous video we went through pawn pushing in e5, one of the main moves, and we talked so much about everything you need to know. What about e takes d5? Okay, you don't take back with the queen because you don't want to give tempos to your opponent. They're gonna develop the knights, so you just play knight f6 and you want to recapture the pawn in d5 with the knight. Let's go through the three most popular options. One of them is, let's start with bishop c4 to protect the pawn. Well, it doesn't really protect the pawn in a way that you can take, right? And it looks like our opponent can take back, and then the knight can go out. But to be honest, if you think about it, the pawn is dropping in g2, and so this doesn't really come with tempo, unlike earlier when you had the chance to take here. Obviously, taking in d5, knight c3, you can't. You need to retreat the queen. Is like some sort of stupid Scandinavian. So after bishop c4, take knight c3, putting more pressure on the knight, and now simply e6, defending. Okay, let's look at two options here, just two brief mentions. One of them is if knight to f3. Looks like a normal move, but this is not a poison pawn. Knight f4, this is just much better for black at this point. Why would white do that? He has to be careful. This is not a poison pawn, even if your opponent, you think you can play d4, putting a pawn in the center, attacking the knight, but now simply check, king moves, knight to h4, the knight is safe, is protected by the queen, the bishop moves away, it looks like a fork, it looks like you're going to lose material, but simply bishop e7, you didn't see that. And okay, that's it, you're just trading a position evaluated -3. If they play knight e4, trying to be a bit more, trying to develop, maybe aiming for the square, knight d6 check, really dangerous check, not right now, but potential, or simply attacking the square in c5 after the bishop. You just take this knight and you don't have to worry anymore. Take with the king, not with the queen, obviously, because if you take with the queen, they take back and the knight is still attacking this square. I don't think that it's that much of a problem. The best way is to take here, because after taking back, you've got an attack on the square in d4. I was looking for something else, like if you take the queen is still going to take this, but yeah, I guess you can still take this pawn, but there's no point, really. You want to keep your queen in the d file and take the pawn, and then castle. So let's not look at that. After taking the pawn in f4 here, what about castle? What's going on now? Knight g6, d4 by white, take, bishop c5, pin in the knight. That's it. They're gonna have to defend it, and now knight c6, increasing the pressure on the knight. We are better. Now the best move is to simply play bishop to b5, because you got too much attack on the square e5, and the knight is pinned, so you're also threatening e5 potentially. So bishop e5 pinning our knight. Castle, the knight is no longer pinned, they have to take our knight, otherwise we're winning material. Take back, queen to d2 is met with e5. You will just win the game, and you're winning material, because after taking the queen, see, if the knight goes back and you take here, yes, well, you can't take the bishop, they can take the knight, but then the bishop falls. So after taking back with the pawn here, the best move by white is knight to a4, removing the piece, attacking the piece that is pinning that knight. Bishop d6 has to happen now, but this is quite ugly, and white has survived, but black is up a pawn, got the bishop pair, and white pieces are placed a very stupid way. However, this is like the best that white can get out of this variation. Position evaluated -2. It's just positive for black. Let's go back when we played e6, right? So when they played knight to c3, e6 to protect the knight. Instead of knight f3, what about d3? Normal move to defend the pawn in f4, which is being targeted by the knight. Okay, well, now take knight, surprisingly. White has a strong center of pawns, but now you're just going with g6 and you're going to be putting pressure on the pawn in c3. Knight f3, bishop g7, d4. White has to defend, has to prevent bishop c3. Knight c6, putting more and more pressure on that square. No, I don't have castle, I have bishop e3 to defend the pawn, because now we have 3 attackers to that square. We're threatening, obviously, if take, you've got enough attackers, and so white has to do something about it. Castle will be the move to continue at this point, but you're going up a pawn. But if white defends it, you play queen a5, to finalize the attack on the square c3, you want to take that square and you'll be doing very good. Queen to d2, protecting it more, castle. Okay, what's going on now? Castle, b5, attacking the bishop. The bishop has to go where? If bishop goes to b3, c4 traps it. If bishop goes to e2, then rook d8, put the rook in the same file with the queen, rook f to d1, bishop e7 in fianchetto. And now what's going on? A move like knight to e5 looks really logical. Okay, look, first of all, c4 here just loses because obviously you can take here. And after all the trades, remember that you still have more pressure, a lot of pressure over d4. So that's not possible. A move like instead, after fianchettoing, a move like knight e5 looks logical, but actually you can take the knight, they take back, and then you can take this, and they cannot take back, and you know the game is falling apart for our opponent. So bishop b7. After bishop b7, what about rook a to b1? Best move. Okay, a6, put more protection over the pawn. a4, logical move to attack the pawn. Obviously, we don't really want to take that pawn with the queen, because rook a1 puts our queen in a very uncomfortable position. So after a4, we want to play b4. And okay, take rook d to c1. These are all best moves according to the engine. Bishop to f8 to protect the square a bit further. And a move like knight to g5 now is simply met by knight d4. This cannot be taken because you can swap everything. If bishop takes, you can take, and obviously taking back, and then bishop c5 will pin the queen. So that's not possible. Instead, after bishop f8, a move like c3 seems logical. So the white wants to open the fires. It's the only thing left to do at this point. Take, knight b4. And this is white, you know, we're going very far now. We're not into theory anymore, of course, but this is white playing computer moves. He's got an isolated pawn, and there's nothing. The position is slightly better for black. Bishop to d2, increasing the attack on the knight. Rook a to c8, attacking the queen. Queen moves. Fine. Take. Rook a1. So we're up now more material. Well, we're up a pawn. Queen has to go back, and it looks crazy because you can get taken by simply playing the bishop, right? What's going to happen now to defend that bishop is not really possible. Queen a2, but then you take this one with check, completely over. What else could have been done? I mean, there's two attackers. Maybe something like this gets taken by the queen. I mean, queen d2 is the move recommended by the engine, but still you're going to take this, and it's a favorable endgame. It's -3 on the engine. Apparently the engine says the rook can take this pawn, but then you take here, and you're up a pawn, and it's just this king is much less safe than the black king. So let's go back. Where were we? Okay, after knight f6, we're going through the let's do from the start. So d5, they take the pawn. Knight f6, we're looking at the variation bishop c4, knight takes back, knight c3, e6, and we went through knight d3 extensively. We also went through d3. That means we've done everything. Okay, actually let's close this line. Okay, let's go back. So after d5, early on, pawn takes, knight f6, there's a way that seems logical to defend the pawn, which is c4. We're gonna go through that. That's gonna be the main thing. There's also a move I encountered a few times, d4, but it's not ideal. You play e6, and we're trying to develop pieces. For example, if white plays knight f3, right, you just take back. They take, you take back. Yes, the pawn is isolated, but position is evaluated almost -2. There's no reason for white to give up the pawn like that. I mean, white didn't give up a pawn, but the position is better for us because white has given up. If you play e5 as well, or also if you're watching this video play against the Grand Prix, you know that it's one of the most important weaknesses for the King's Gambit player or for the Grand Prix player is this weak diagonal on the king. They can't really castle. And it's not like they could do what else. I mean, what else can be done to try and castle? If they play, I don't know, this move, right? Then you take here, knight takes back, and then you just carry on with development. In this case, it looks like white can castle, well, not now because we're attacking the knight. So take, after taking the knight, let's say here, now we can rebuild the pawn structure. It looks like, yes, they can do this, but bishop c5 is coming anyway, king moves, and castle. White now has a pawn in f4 that he didn't manage to swap with the pawn in e, therefore it's kind of a liability for this rook. Okay, it's not like it's a massive problem. White can still play f5. This is a thematic move. Yeah, so this is white hasn't created any weakness for us. His position is slightly better for black. But anyway, we're gonna go through this scenario of d4 later on. Let's now go back here and go to the scenario with c4, because also d4 is going to be discussed a lot in the next game when we discuss the knight c3 Grand Prix, the proper Grand Prix. Because I think this one is called McDonnell, I'm not even sure, but you get the point, is when they play f4 against the Sicilian. Anyway, knight f6, c4, let's go through this and then we'll have time to talk about d4 scenarios later as well. c4, e6. So, this one now, what can be done by our opponent? They can choose to take the pawn or keep developing. Let's say if they take the pawn, you go on with development of the bishop. And now, white is retaining a pawn advantage. But you knight f3, bishop d6, carry on with development. What's going to happen now? So let's go through a passive move like d3 to protect the pawn in f4. Seems to be making sense. Castle, bishop e2. The problem with playing d3 is now that the light squared bishop is locked in here. And also you need to understand that c4 does, this pawn here does protect the pawn in d5, and so the white player is really holding to that pawn, that extra pawn he has. But the problem is that white is now sacrificing the mobility of the light square bishop, so that's bad. Bishop e2, knight c6, castle, rook e8, queen e1. These are all the best moves. Bishop to 5, finalizing the pressure on that pawn. Knight to c3. Obviously we're gonna take this pawn because the bishop is pinned. There was not much to do. Let's say queen to g3, you might say, is the typical move of the Grand Prix, but remember that the bishop in e2 will not be guarded. Queen to f2 potentially, but now knight to g4, right? Big trouble. If the white player could take a move back, he will take a move back. So what to do? Computer says queen to d1, obviously, but now queen c7, finalizing the pressure on that pawn. g3 maybe to protect it, but now rook a to d8. Position is evaluated better for black, even though black is down a pawn, which really means that the position is much more flexible for black. Black has got much more freedom. If instead knight h4 to put more protection over here, you will play knight to d4. The knight is sitting there gloriously attacking the bishop. More knight to c3 to defend it. And now the best move according to the engine is bishop to d7. And we're gonna drop the line here because obviously we can't go. The bishop d7 is obvious because we want to play b5, b4, misplace this knight and go for this. And our opponent will have to make a few positional concessions for that. This knight is stupid, at least for the moment. This bishop doesn't have anywhere to go. The bishop doesn't have anywhere to go. So black enjoys a better game. We will look at similar scenarios later. Now here, back at this position, we'll look at the variation where they take in e6. Take knight f3, bishop d6, and we just went through d3, just a brief mention. Let's do two other brief mentions before we move on to the main line. What to do here? There is also d4 or... Okay, well, if bishop e2 now, remember earlier we tried d3 because the bishop needed to defend the pawn in f4. Now if bishop e2 now, you can just take in f4. And it makes no sense for white to play like that. Castle, bishop c7, retreating, knight c3, knight c6, d3, h6. Normal moves. You want to avoid the pinning of your knight. Bishop e3, queen e7. And now a move like a3, just to make an example, right? That means you can just take in c4 and you're attacking the bishop. It's safe. There's no Zwischenzug. There's nothing. You're winning a pawn. So a move like queen to d2 to protect the bishop and develop. Castle, b3. This is a bad move because bishop a5 pins the knight and this is big trouble. Queen has to move away, but then take, and a bishop g4 releases an attack on the bishop. Queen can protect it for the moment, but now you put double attack on it and this is a skewer. Whenever they move, you're winning material. So that was an example. b3 is bad move. Here white's best move will be king to h1, but that still allows you to take the pawn in c4. So b3 was a bad move positionally speaking because bishop a5. White cannot defend the pawn the white pawn in c4. That's it. That's the plain truth. Let's go back a second. So earlier we went through all of that. So okay, we're looking at the variation. Pawn takes in no, pawn takes in e6, take, knight f3, bishop d6. What about d4? This is one of the, it's a scenario that is very important. It's one of the most important points of being a Sicilian player. Take back, right? Take the pawn. Two ways to take back. If queen takes back, just develop and position evaluated -3, right? The queen will have to move, but where? Let's say queen to e3, castle, and we're gonna be. You see now the queen is dangerously placed on the same file as the king. Bishop d3, knight to b4. They will have to castle, take, and obviously when they take back, you're gonna have a check with the bishop, and then you win material, a lot of material. So that doesn't work. After knight c6, you're attacking the queen when the queen took in d4. If queen to d1, castle, bishop e2, it looks like our opponent is going to be fine, but no, because check. And white loses the right to castle. Bishop d2 blocking instead, if they don't want to lose the right to castle. Queen b6. Let's make a point here that bishop taking in b4 doesn't work, because take back and knight to c3, but now knight to g4. Remember that white cannot castle, because we have queen in b6, white cannot castle. Queen to knight to g4, position evaluated -5. Let's go back here after queen b6. What about queen to b3? Double attack on the bishop. Our opponent will be very happy to try and swap everything. Maybe use the pinned bishop to attack it and swap queens. Knight to g4 once again, threatening the end of the game. Well, not right now, but soon enough. Rook f1 to protect from the threat of queen f2. Knight e3, attacking the rook. Rook moves away. Bishop f5, threatening bishop to c2, which as far as I can see traps the queen. If they take instead, you take back with the knight. Position once again evaluated -5. It's sickening. What about knight a3? Stopping the whole. We still have too many attackers over here. Although the most cold-blooded move is rook a to e8. And look at this. It's ridiculous. Okay, where were we? So everything has been done with the variation of pawn takes. Let's go back here. So at the start, d5, when they take the pawn, knight f6, c4, e6. If they don't take the pawn in e6, which we just saw, knight to c3. Now this seems to be still protecting the pawn in d5. So white might think, okay, I'm still succeeding at defending that pawn. But now finally we are indeed going to take. Here now, this can be taken back in two different ways. Let's say, for example, knight takes, take. That's it. They can't attack us anymore with tempo. Knight f3, bishop e7. This is just better for black now. d4, knight c6. What to do now? Okay, if bishop e3 to defend that pawn more, this loses because you take the pawn. Knight takes, check. Okay, g3 is not possible because then the rook will be under attack. Bishop f2, check. King moves. Obviously not with the queen here because you can make a check, deflecting the king, and then the queen is under attack. So king e2 has to happen. This is ridiculous. Knight check, queen takes back, bishop g4. Goodbye, dreams of glory for white. What about after d4 here, and we play knight c6? What about, instead of bishop e3 actually, what about bishop e5, pinning our strong knight? Castle, take. Castle, take. And now queen to b6, pin in the knight, the usual thing. King h1 needs to do it as soon as possible. Rook to d8, exploiting the pin. That's it, we're winning material. Bishop e3 doesn't work because of bishop c5. Position evaluated -4 because it's absolutely impossible to protect that knight even further. What about here? What about queen e2? White says, you know what, take my knight, I'll take your bishop. No, because we attacked the knight more, but now it looks like the knight can go back. But now bishop f5, developing. -3 on the engine. Queen e5, these are all best moves. What to do? Bishop d3 attacking the rook. Rook moves away. f6 attacking the queen. Like, there's no tomorrow. I see that a trade here is possible, but you can take. And now bishop c4, allowing an attack on the back rank, and also an attack on the rook. If the rook moves all the way back, bishop f2, and it looks like that rook is trapped. You're winning material. White might try to just develop. You take. But this is just completely winning. But bishop a2. And yeah, completely winning endgame, as you can tell. So after the queen e2 and with attacking, bishop f5, queen e5. And then when we play the f6, instead of the swap, what about oops, after f6, What about queen to c3? This is the best move according to the engine, but now bishop f2 will do the same thing. Rook to d1, rook a to c8, attacking the queen. The queen will have to move away. Queen moves away. Queen to b5. And yeah, this is a winning position, completely winning position. Look at our tremendous bishops, right? Even if you play the best moves, h3, h6 according to the engine, queen b3 check, okay, fine, take. And now a6 to stop the arrival of that rook. And we're gonna leave the line here. White, black is position validated -4. Black's got infiltration of the rooks very easy, and you also got bishop e2 idea. Yeah, we'll leave the line there because I've got more to show and it's a lot of stuff here. So here after knight to c3 by white, if you remember this position. Let's look from the start actually. d5, take, c4, really want to defend that pawn, e6. If they take, you're done a pawn, but you know what to do from the previous line. Knight c3, take, and now take. So we're looking at pawn takes, right? And now takes. And white says, you know what, I need to develop. Knight f3, bishop e7, check. Knight c6, what to do now? Two options we're going to look at. If bishop takes straight away, take. And we have a double isolated pawn. So what's going on? Castle, d4. Okay, so d4 kind of had to happen because we needed to attack we're attacking the pawn in f4. d4, take, bishop a6, attacking the rook e1, rook e8. Knight c6, attacking the queen, attacking the bishop. What's going on? Why did we allow all of this? Because check. King moves, queen h4. And now white has to think. A move like bishop to d2 to develop, just make an example, is met with knight to f6. And the idea of going to knight to g4, and the knight in g4 will be so amazing. Attacking this. Queen f3 it seems like it stops everything, but actually bishop to b7, and position evaluated -3 for a reason. Because knight to g4 is now such a big threat. So let's make an example. If okay, the queen can't move away because otherwise the knight will be gone, and the knight is pinned. What to play now? Maybe b4. This is the best way according to the engine, the idea of playing b5, but you can just take this, rook a b1, that's a skewer, a5. Okay, looks like a3 will win, but now you take this. Crazy enough, why can they not take here? Because of this. So let's go back. Knight to c6 here in this position. So we were looking at this line, bishop e7, check, knight c6. What about knight e5? Castle, bishop c6, take. We ignore it because you can take back, and that's so crazy because white can play g3. We didn't take a piece back, and now they can play g3, and now we got two pieces. I mean, we have one piece under attack, but we've done a piece. So even if we recapture this knight, we'll lose this one. But look carefully at what's going to happen. You take this one, they are not going to take the bishop. Otherwise, check. King moves, knight takes there. -7 on the engine, right? This is not like some sort of positional sacrifice that looks very good. Look at bishop h3. Look at d3 maybe to allow an attack on the knight. Check. King moves. Rook into the game. Completely careless. What's gonna happen now? Bishop f4, reducing the initiative. Take back. Queen f3, hoping for a swap. Check. King moves. Recapture the knight. Position still -7. This is not a joke. This is not a joke. What is our opponent even going to do? Knight to e4, best move according to the engine. Rook e6, unstoppable. This rook cannot play, this king cannot play, this rook cannot play. I mean, you can say that he can play, but then f5. The knight will have to go. Knight to g3, check. Okay, well, let's leave the line there, come on. After g3, attacking the bishop. What about, okay, we took the bishop, right? What about white sees all of that and says, you know what? I'll take this pawn with an attack on the queen. I'm still attacking your bishop. I might be able to castle and go for it. Queen to f6, attacking the knight. Knight to e5, back here. Take this one, sacrifice. The knight cannot be taken since the pawn is pinned. They can take that, but then check. The queen can't move, because otherwise the knight will take it. Check, king f2, check. King moves, check. And mate next. So we've done everything of this variation with d5. I'm just going to check it. I think we have. So we're going to go to the next to the next one. So let's finally close this f4 chapter, and let's see how much stuff do we have to do here. It's a lot of stuff. Yeah, let's go through this. Okay, so after e4 and c5, white can initiate the game with knight c3. And you need to play a6 now. And we've also mentioned something like this in the past. So go look at the other videos of the Grand Prix in my channel. You will find so much repertoire. So now they can play a lot of stuff. For instance, f4, knight f3, g3, a4, all of that. And I have so much of this. Let's start with a very brief mention of f4. Very brief mention, so I can delete this line and then move on. Because we've talked about these scenarios extensively. We play b5 now. Obviously not d5 because it gets taken for free. The idea of the white player to play knight c3 to initiate the Grand Prix like this, they are still going to play f4. f4 is going to happen, but knight c3 stops d5, which is the main move. So if they start the game with f4, you need to play d5 straight away, and we know exactly what to do next. If they play knight c3, a6, because you want to play b5, and this plays this knight. So f4, b5. Knight f3, e6. What happens next? Let's look at this. Okay, d3. But before d3, let's make a very brief mention of bishop e2. Bishop e2 is knight c6, d3. So the bishop is locked in. That's the thing that the white player is sacrificing to get some more control of the center. But we have such much space on the queen side, and the light square bishop is going to suffer. Our light square bishop instead is going to be stronger. Bishop b7 castle, bishop e7, f5, the usual move that we very much hate. All those who play against the Grand Prix, what to do here? You feel under pressure, queen to c7, ignore it. Knight to g5, look how much attack now on f7, on e6. They want to take, they want to put the knight in f7, and they want to win the game as usual. Knight f6, take, it's fine, nothing to worry. Bishop f4, attacking the queen. Look, he feels so much under pressure here. Looks like amazing development, but actually black is better. e5. Bishop moves. Knight. Now it's where are we? Castle. Knight to d5 by white, and attacking the queen. Take. Knight to d4. And we should be winning the pawn in d5. This cannot be defended with c4 because h6 kicks the knight away. The knight moves. Now you take this pawn. They take back, and now f5. And the position is slightly better for black. Yes, they have a passed pawn, but it's not going anywhere. And let's make an example. Just a random move for white. I don't know, rook. Maybe rook to b1 with the idea of pushing b4 eventually. But you take this, take back, e4, and white has nowhere to put the knight that makes sense. Let's say knight to d2 for instance, but now f4. So you're conquering so much space. The position evaluated -3. So let's remove this line, and after e6, instead of bishop e2, right, d3. It's kind of the same thing. You can play d5 now. And what to do next? Very brief mentions. What about g3? To put the bishop in fianchetto. If you think that the bishop, since it's suffering on the main diagonal, what if he wants to go for the fianchetto? b4, attacking the knight. The knight is going to be misplaced. It's going to move away. Whatever he moves, doesn't matter. We're going to win this pawn. They take back, fine. Take this. Bishop b7. We're going to win that pawn. This cannot be pushed because of the knight will be falling. Knight g5 seems to be protecting the pawn, but obviously you just attack it. There's no point. So that's how you punish it. After d5, instead of g3, what about e5? The usual move. One of the thematic moves. Knight c6, bishop e2, h5. Castle, knight h6. And this is now a scenario that we've seen a lot in the previous video. Why is someone texting me? Why? I don't want anyone to text me. Especially when I'm making a video, right? People are craving for endgame strategies videos. So queen to e1 is the thematic move. A move like d4 now is simply met with knight f5. And the knight is sitting so well in that. Make sure you look at the other videos. There's so much mentioning of all the patterns you need to know. Queen e1, bishop to b7. And we're going to play like this. Queen g3 is the usual move they play in this position. But now queen to b6. Nothing's happening here because we're not castled. And we're just going to play this game. Referring to the videos we watched in the past. All those videos. So let's go back a second now, and let's go back here, d5. We mentioned g3, we mentioned e5. What about a3? We haven't mentioned this one. Why a3? Obviously to stop b5, to stop the misplacing of the white knight. So bishop e7, bishop e2, knight c6, castle, bishop b7, e5. Okay, knight h6 is always the same stuff, nothing changes. Queen e1, the usual thematic move, knight f5. g4 is the move they play all the time and then play f5. I remember how under pressure I felt when this happened. But now you go here, with threatening knight going in c2, from where he will be making a fork. Bishop to d1 seems to be stopping that, but now take, knight to d4, doing the same thing. Okay, bishop to d1 once again, to stop you from going to c2. What's happening? h5. And now the arrival of the rook is inevitable. Although if white plays with computer move accuracy, then white, this is not like lost or anything. The game is playable, but the Grand Prix is neutralized. Because if they play g5, we've seen it in the previous video, g5 neutralizes completely the only initiative of the white play, because then you can play knight f5, and that's it. These 3 pawns here are like French pawns. They're not going anywhere. If take knight f5 anyway, bishop g4, g6. It's crazy because instead the pawn in h5 is defended, yet we don't care. g6, open the files. Take, that's fine. Take, that's fine. Stop taking us. Position evaluated -5. With threatening pawn to d4, the bishop and the queen together will be gloriously strong. White should probably resign at this point. Okay, not much is left. So e4, c5, knight c3, a6. And what about, let's look at some variation. Okay, what about this one? a4, just a brief mention of this. a4 I've always found it extremely annoying, because white will be able to play his annoying f4 move, and you can't really play this move. How do we respond to this? e6, and after f4, knight c6. We kind of need to give up on that b5 plan. Knight f3, d5. This is happening anyway, so you need to play e6 to support d5. e5, blocking the center the usual way, knight g e7, bishop e2, h5, castle, b6. That's how you play. If you can't play b5, play b6. d3, knight f5, and we're sitting in the usual shelter, queen e1, bishop b7, h3. The idea of playing g4, obviously. Bishop e7, g4, but you can take, and now knight f to d4, again attacking the weak square. So for example, I'll move like bishop e3, you just take this pawn, there's no compensation. I'll move like f5, the usual move they play, you just take here, there's no compensation. Again, if bishop to d1 protecting, then queen to c7 is the best move. And this king is just completely exposed with no compensation. There's no reason to play like that. So let's not look at this variation with a4. So a6, here the initial position a6. What about g3? Okay, g3 to put the bishop in fianchetto. I found this also very annoying. So there's g3 we need to look at, but there's also knight f3. Let's actually look at knight f3. No, let's start with g3. g3, d6, bishop g2 in fianchetto. How do we deal with this new pattern? The idea of the white player is still to play f4 eventually, right? But also this bishop will be becoming very dangerous. So knight c6. Okay, so if they play, okay, what are we going to look at now? Knight f3 or f4? Let's start with f4, so we get it out of the way. f4, g6. That's how you battle it. Knight f3, bishop g7. So white needs to play knight f3 and castle, but first wants to play f4 in order to open the file for the rook. The usual reason to play f4. Bishop g7, castle, rook b8. Get the rook out of the dangerous diagonal. Two options we're going to look at before we dismiss this line. If knight to e2, the idea of playing d4, right? Knight f6, e5, attacking us. What are we going to do? Take, and now knight g4. So e5 doesn't work because now we got a lot of attack over that pawn. We got 3 attackers. d4 doesn't work. Take, and then you just take this pawn. There's no compensation. So let's go back. After playing rook b8, d3, the more solid variation, knight f6, and after bishop e3 developing b5. So this move was going to happen inevitably. Let me show you the reason. e5 now seems to be possible. Knight g4, and it's attacking the bishop, so they can't take up pawn. They have to move the bishop again. b4, finally misplacing the knight. It looks crazy because this looks like a decent square, but no, because now take, They attack us, they can't take back because we got too many attackers on e5. So h3 attacking us first, move the knight again. And now take this knight first. They take back, castle. a3, pawn takes. Rook takes back. It looks like this is a decent position for white. These pawns in the center might not be very easy to take. Yes, we can take in... well, actually, we should take this in b2. This is the best move, right? Taking in here does allow our opponent to build an attack here and remove our dark square bishop. No reason to let that happen. Rook takes in b2 is the best thing to do. Position evaluated almost -3. So let's drop it there. So from the start, we're looking at a6 and now g3, d6, bishop g2, knight c6, knight f3, knight f6. And okay, what about after knight f6 now? What about d4 or d3? Let's look at these moves. A move like d4 straight away is met with bishop g4. This is to remember. In this scenario, this move is to remember. Because now we're putting double attack on that knight, and because white has committed the knight on c3, he can't defend this knight even further, so you're just going to take the pawn in d4. So after they take the pawn in c5, you can take back. Obviously, if you know, queen takes but then rook takes, there's no point. Castle, but take, and now knight d4. Right? Position is still savable for white. This is not lost, although it's starting to look a bit tragic, but it's actually fine. Well, okay, if the knight takes, then simply take this. Knight e6 is a great move by white to damage our pawn structure. Now they can recapture, but we're still down the exchange, and yeah, I mean, it's still playable. The position is only slightly better for black, but still playable. Rook d8, bishop f4, developing g6, a4 by white, bishop g7, a5. This is only best moves, but still, rook to f8. And we are not going to castle. Our pawn structure is quite ugly, and our opponent has a bishop pair, which is kind of okay as a compensation for exchange. But after h3, knight d7, king moves, you're going to play knight to e5. You know, you're going to have to take it from here. The best move according to the engine now is to take the knight, give up the bishop pair, because this knight is too strong. What are you going to do? If b3 to stop the knight from going to c4, then the diagonal on this rook, the diagonal on this rook is very weak. Position evaluated -4 after the move f4, because if they move away, you can, you know, move the knight wherever you want. If they take, you move the knight to f7 with a double attack. So obviously that's not possible. So white's best thing to do is to give up the bishop pair. And you go on to play the endgame with the exchange. So in this position, after queen takes, rook takes, knight to d4, what about the best move? Rook to d3 to protect the knight further. Take this one. Rook moves, take this one. What's going to happen now? Rook takes. Also bishop takes is possible, but now knight to e1 attacks the two of them. This is such a disaster of a game for white now. The position is horrible. White will have to play like an engine to survive. Rook e3, but now take, e6. And we're up a pawn. Bishop e3 developing, knight d7. Bishop f4, bishop e7. Rook to d3, long castle. And position evaluated -2. What else is there to do? Like if they double up the rooks, b5 is the best move. And it's just up a pawn with no compensation. You gotta swap everything and go to a winning endgame. What if after rook to d3 here, as we saw, to give more protection to the pinned knight, knight c2, rook moves, and now takes. What if they take with the rook? Now you can still play the same move. The rook has to move, but now you take the bishop. Take back e6. So it's very, very similar to earlier on. What to do now? If f4 now, bishop e7, simple like that. Don't worry about it. f5, you castle long. You don't care about losing that pawn because this is a better endgame. I mean, you're not losing the pawn. After this, they're going to have an isolated pawn. So are you. But now they can't develop the bishop, right? So they have to play what? Pawn here to develop the bishop? b5. Okay, bishop out. But now check. And they have to block like this. And now you double up the rooks. Position evaluated -3. Let's go back. After taking the bishop here, the king takes back, e6. What about rook to d3 instead of pawn to f4. This looks better, it stops us from castling. So rook d8, forces swap, take, take, bishop g5, being our knight, king c7, take, take. It looks like an equal endgame with equal chances. Actually, black is better. b3, bishop e7, f4 is coming, and rook to d8. It's just gonna happen anyway. What if they hadn't played that move? What if they play rook d1? Looks like a normal move. Well, bishop e7 anyway. Where is the knight gonna go? Knight a4 isn't going anywhere. You can attack it again. Knight, maybe e2, and then you can play b5 once again. Knight f4 isn't really going anywhere, right? There's no threats. Rook d8 is gonna happen no matter what. So rook c1, if they want to avoid the trade, it's not good because you can go to d2 and you go 3 against 2. So let's go back a second here, and I think we've seen everything from this line. Let's delete it. In the variation with g3, d6, bishop, knight, develop everything, and now instead of d4, instead of everything we've seen so far, d3. Okay, e6, castle, bishop e7. It's like, you know, these positions are all transposable. h3, castle, bishop e3. This looks like the most solid. Usually they play king to h2, h6, d4, take, take, rook to b8. Always play rook b8 when your opponent has a bishop in fianchetto. f4. And now we are starting to see a Grand Prix where our opponent hasn't made any mistake. And it's not like I've only been showing you the mistakes. These are, you see, the thing is, every move that your opponent plays that to you is not a mistake, turns out that when you look at the engine, it is a mistake. So when I say that all the mistakes, that just means all my opponent's moves that I've been recording over the passage of time that played the Grand Prix against me back in the days when I used to play Sicilian. I've recorded it and kept it here on Lichess. I'm only making videos now so I can just so I can remove them from my things to do list, and because I don't care about Sicilian anymore. All of those moves were actually moves played by players rated roughly 2,100, 2,200 on chess.com, so they're not really bad players. All of those moves were completely reasonable looking moves and also considered fine by the engine, but they all were not good enough because they weren't the best. Now here, this is White having played the best possible variation of this g3 Grand Prix. So, queen c7. f5 is finally coming. What to do now? Bishop to d7. Ignore that pawn. Why? What happens if... Okay, what happens if they... well, let's go through queen f3 first, right? The usual move. Put more and more pressure over there. Okay, knight e5, attack the queen. Queen has to move. Knight c4, attack the bishop. Bishop has to move. d5. We're conquering so much space. If e5, then you just take this pawn. So there's no such thing. If b3, to attack the knight, knight moves away. The knight is very weak in c3. It's you're going to take it, but they can fork you. Take the knight because it comes with an attack on the rook. What else can be done? Bishop to b2 defending, but then you can take, right? The knight d takes e4. So that didn't work. Okay, after queen c3, by the way, here you might argue that the rook can save itself, but the two knights are still forked. Okay, well, knight f2 e4 with an attack on the queen. Queen moves, knight takes. Position evaluated -6. What a joke. Queen to c3 here. Instead of rook b1, what about bishop d2? Attacking the queen, saving the rook, and our knights are still forked. Queen to c5. Okay, looks like they can take our knight. If they take in f6, bishop takes, double attack on the knight, protected, but then you take back with the pawn here. Position evaluated -3. So it's much better. White doesn't have, you see the white queen and the white rook on the same file, they're not going anywhere, ever. If instead the other knight is taken, take back, pawn takes here, take back with the pawn. Again, position still evaluated -3. The knight is about to move and become extremely powerful. And yeah, so let's drop it there because this is such an amazing position. Let's make a normal move. Queen e2, getting out of the way of that. Well, no, not now because we've got an attack on the knight. Knight f3 maybe. Does it look normal? You can take. Well, rook takes is gonna get pinned. King takes. Bishop to b5, attacking the rook. Rook moves away. Knight check. King goes here. And now rook takes here. Take back. Knight takes here. So you see how all the tactics come to life. Rook here is not possible. You gotta check here. It's a devastation. Bishop goes back. Knight e4 is coming anyway. Giving away this lovely central pawn. But I got the bishop pair, and besides bishop check, that king is gonna be in big trouble. So let's go away from this line. Instead of queen f3, here in this position, instead of queen f3, what about queen e2? More normal looking move. Knight e5 doesn't come with an attack on the queen this time, but improves the position. Rook a to d1, b5, the usual move. g4, white is coming with the famous Grand Prix pawn storm. What to do? b4. Knight b1, e takes, rook f to e8, g5. How all the memories are coming to life now. Those negatives. It's like looking at a picture album from your childhood and realize that you really hated it. In my case, it's the Grand Prix. That's what I hated it so much. Bishop takes, d5. Take the pawn. Are we down a pawn? No. Why are we up more than 3 points according to engine evaluation? Because queen c5 attacks the bishop. If the bishop goes to e4, then bishop to b5. It's a nice skewer. If instead the bishop goes to e4, then once again, same stuff. This works anyway. This doesn't do anything because you can do this. So let's go back. Once again, I think we are actually done with the g3 line. So let's move. Are we done to finishing? Are we soon to finish this video? Yeah, almost. Very close. Give me 3 more minutes. So e4, c5, knight c3, knight f3. What about this type of Grand Prix? Well, it's no longer the Grand Prix. It's just the closed Sicilian now. But it's part of the it's part of the closed Sicilian repertoire. So let's put it in this video. Let's mention more patterns. It doesn't harm you to watch more and more patterns, because chess repeats itself in every opening, right? This is the pearl of wisdom that now you're listening at. I don't know what minute this is, but it is worth rewatching this entire video many times, all over and over, even though I think it's been an hour or something. No, probably not. But all over and over, so you can get to the point where I say that chess repeats itself in every opening. This is very important. Once you understand this, your rating will go up at least 10 points in a year. Anyway, e6. What to do now? Well, let's look at this variation where they play bishop e2 now. Bishop e7, castle, b4. The knight is misplaced and we're going to win that pawn. Always the same pattern. Knight to e4. What about knight d5? They tried this against me, which is why I have it in the record. This is some sort of referencing to the Smith-Morra type of sacrifice. Actually, the position here is evaluated 0. Okay? So this is a thematic sacrifice. Take, and you don't take back, otherwise when the rook goes to e1, it's looking really bad. You don't want that. Let's see what the engine thinks about. Oh, white is winning. White is winning. Bishop f3. White is done a piece and is winning. What to do now? If you take back, calmly take back. How's the? Oh yeah, there's an attack on the rook. I forgot about that, and we cannot save it. Apparently, oh, d5 is a good move. Knight c6 is not possible because there's 2 attackers over there. Obviously, it's completely lost. Rook a7, rook e1 check, bishop here, and I suppose knight f5. Yeah, knight f5. I don't know. How about? Can we not do anything about it? G6. Oh, because he's got check. Maybe knight d6 check. Oh, easy. Okay. Well, anyway. So after this sacrifice of the knight, take with the pawn. They take back. Bishop c5 is the key move. Rook e1, threatening the attack. King to f8. You don't want to play knight e7. You don't want to pin yourself. Knight b3, attacking the bishop. Bishop back. a3. These are all best moves. Take, d6. And now the only problem is that our king cannot castle. But after bishop f4, putting pressure on that weak pawn, h5, bishop takes. This is all, given that away for free. Because now we want to develop with tempo. Since we're down material, if you're down development, you want to develop with tempo. Okay, it's very important. Otherwise, your opponent is better developed than you. So bishop f3, king g8, and black is up a piece. However, position is equal. So you're going to have to take this from here. If you play against a human, 99% you're going to win this game. Because obviously, they're going to be playing down a piece. Only the engine says that this is not, that this is a draw. Okay. So let's go back here. After playing b4, instead of that crazy sacrifice, what about knight a4? Bishop takes pawn. So it's a free pawn. Rook e1, preparing the pinning. Knight c6. Bishop c4. A lot of attack. Okay, defend the bishop. Bishop g5. Pinning the knight so the white can win the bishop for free. Are we going to realize it? We're going to play knight takes d4. When they take back, you go back. Okay? Knight to b6, attacking the rook. Rook b8, just save it. Bishop takes, queen takes. Queen moves away because obviously a swap is favorable for us since that knight is not going anywhere. Queen moves away, bishop e7, right? So that knight, the white knight is trapped. The white queen is defended. b3, so the white will be able to play knight to a4, and from there it will be safe. d5, bishop has to move. d4, queen is disconnected from that knight, and we're going to win material. So where are we? Okay, we've seen this bishop e2 move. Okay, almost done with the video. Stick around. e4, c5, the close Sicilian. Take, e6, bishop d3, bishop b7, castle, knight c6, bishop e3, knight f6. I've got 3 very brief mentions here. What about knight taking in c6? Let's get rid of this mention. Bishop takes back. And now, f3 to protect that pawn is met with queen c7, g4, the pawn storm is coming, b4. Knight moves, d5. And a lot of attack on that pawn. They can attack our knight, but you can take this. You don't care about the piece because you take this piece. And now, if they take this one, rook g8, position evaluated -2. Much better for black. You're going to be taking that. That king is not going to be safe. The whole game, bishop h6 to protect the pawn. But now you take this knight. And it's a completely winning position. You're going to be taking the queen takes pawn and then bishop takes bishop. Take everything. You're winning the material. If after taking the bishop they take back with the queen, pawn takes in f6. This is so much better now. Okay, so let's go back here. When we played knight takes and then bishop takes, I went through f3. What about f4? With the usual f5 idea. Okay, b4, knight e2, take the pawn. Free pawn, no compensation. Okay, let's go back a second. Instead of f3, instead of f4, what about a3, the usual move to stop b4? Okay, queen c7, f4, bishop e7. Now it looks like f4, f5 is possible. Bishop d6, attacking the pawn in a2, g3, take. take, goes there. Check, goes there. Wins the bishop, goes there. Check, goes there. Check, goes there. What are we doing here? Oh, knight g4. Queen e2, castle. -5 on the engine. What can be done here? If white takes, take back. And what to do now? Queen to g2, forcing a swap. Check. King moves. What's happening now? Knight e3, making a fork. Okay, well, they can swap, you might argue. Rook takes back. Okay, well, the attack on the queen remains. He's gonna go where? Here. But now queen g4 check. Can't block. Has to go there. Queen f3 check. Has to go there. Rook f4 ends the game. So let's go back and delete this line as well. So we're looking at the close Sicilian. After knight c6, bishop e3, knight f6, 2 more moves we have to see, and then finally is the end of the video. Let's go through queen e2. Normal move. b4. Misplacing the knight. Knight a4, d5. Take. I mean the knight, take the knight. Bishop takes, queen takes, queen f3. And now it's kind of a skewer because, well, you see, you have to take the queen. If you take the bishop, they're taking here. So you have to take this, upper pawn. But now knight to b6 appear possible. The king doesn't look safe. You play rook d8, attacking the bishop. Bishop has to move back. Knight to g4, attacking the bishop. Bishop has to move back. Bishop to d6. You're threatening this move. I wonder why on the engine I have rook moving fb1. Let's see what can be done. Actually, I don't see anything that can be done here. What about h3, for instance? Well, bishop h2 is mate, but oh, I've got this move, rook fb. Oh, because this is the engine. Actually, it's not a variation; it's a move by the engine. The reason is that after rook f to c1. After the check, the king will have an escape. King f1, bishop goes back. Position evaluated -4. So let's drop the line here. And what else have we got here? After knight to b6, attacking the rook b8. What if c3 to protect the bishop? Take. bishop looks like a, yeah, it just allows the rook to get through, but it looks crazy to me because now we can't castle. So I don't understand. If bishop to d4, knight to e4, double attack on that pawn. If that pawn gets defended, h5, -3 on the engine, and we're going to be playing from here because also you're threatening this, and this is a deadly king, a deadly position for that king. Let's go back instead of. Have we seen everything from queen e2? I guess so. Last line, the very last line. Okay. So after take, e6, bishop d3, and bishop e7, knight c6, bishop e3, knight f6, rook e1 instead of queen e2. Bishop d6. Strange move, because he allows f4 and also he blocks the d pawn. However, bishop c5 comes now. Double attack on that knight. Take with check, take, queen b6. Careless of this knight because this knight is not going anywhere. So we're done a piece, but we're threatening this rook, we're pinning it. Queen e1 protects it, but now knight g4 finalizes the attack on that rook. What a sad position for our opponent. Knight e1 still protects that pawn further. Calmly recapture that piece. Queen g3, attacking the knight, take, castle. And black is better. King to h1. Best move, to unpin, but now queen to d4, threatening the weak pawn. Can't play c3, what a great move. You can't play c3 because the bishop will fall. If rook to b1, it's look really bad. f5, f6 is the best move. And again, the position is evaluated -3, over -3. So, let's see, for example, rook d1, yeah, you just take this pawn. And there's, you know, we've got, this pawn is also going to fall very soon. If rook to b1, yeah, that's a free pawn in e4. That's something you want to take. So let's go back here. When white took the bishop with the rook and we played queen pinning, what about king f2 to unpin like that? Looks crazy, but you can't play queen. You can't play knight g4 because the queen's defending it. Take back, queen f3, b4, knight moves, queen b6, pinning the rook once again, d5, take, and the rook is, you know, we're winning material, winning the exchange. What else could have been done? Maybe, well, also not this move, obviously, because if you push here, there's a double attack, there's an attack there, an attack there, so it's game over. And is that all I've got? Yes, it's all I've got. Okay.